para su entorno y que realmente va un paso adelante pues, que el resto de la competencia, es JAMF, ¿no? JAMF, muchos de vosotros ya también lo conocéis porque evidentemente lo tenéis como solución para vuestros iPads a través de la plataforma de JAMF School, pero muchos de vosotros no conocéis pues, la otra parte de la plataforma, ¿no? JAMF también evidentemente trabaja con muchas empresas y esa experiencia con todas esas empresas les ha permitido crear soluciones también pues, para todo el entorno de Apple, no solo de iPadOS, sino pues evidentemente, como sabéis, de iOS. Y hoy vamos a hablar sobre todo del entorno también de macOS, gracias a la solución de JAMF Pro. ¿Vale? Hoy tenemos la suerte, pues evidentemente, de contarnos con nuestro director técnico, Albert Riera, que también muchos de vosotros ya conocéis. Y desde Holanda nos acompañan, pues en este caso, los delegados de JAMF Pro, que son los encargados de hacernos la demo. Ellos nos la van a hacer en inglés, con lo cual, pues evidentemente, nosotros vamos a estar conectados por si tenéis cualquier pregunta, cualquier duda, pues evidentemente ir echándonos un cable y al final será un placer, pues, pararnos 5 minutitos con todos vosotros y poder hacer una rueda de preguntas. Y nada, dicho esto, no sé si Albert quieres añadir algo más.
Perdón, que estaba el micro. Yo por mi parte nada más, daros la bienvenida y en todo caso, pues bueno, más bien que va a ser quien va a realizar la demostración, muy focalizada quizás para el entorno de los que estamos aquí, ¿no? Que es el entorno educativo. Más allá de lo que, como decía Sergio, ya podemos conocer la solución de JAMF Pro para la parte de Macs. Pues, Margin, as you like, in your hands.
Whenever you want, Martin.
This is always so funny. It's always like everything in a different language, and then, okay, Marijn, now it's you. And then you're like, oh, wait, this is me. So that's awesome. So welcome, everyone. My name is Marijn. I'm a system engineer here at JAMF. I'm located in Amsterdam. My Spanish is non-existent, and therefore we're doing it in English. Today, what I would like to do is just show you a little bit around what JAMF is all about. Just to show you a little bit about the backend, how that would look for you or for ITs to manage the devices that are in your MDM solution, and to see what are the possibilities. I'll do quite a high overview of what JAMF Pro is and what it does. If you have any questions or if you have anything you would like to see more in depth, just put it in the Q&A, I guess, and I have it open here so I can, and my colleagues here are here to point me out to that as well. And we can go a little bit more in depth into what that means and how that would look like. So without further ado, I'm going to try and share my screen. Let me see if that's going to work. I think it will. Awesome. So if everything worked correctly, you guys can now see my screen. So what is JAMF? Very simply put, JAMF is a MDM solution to help you as IT and help users to have the best experience with Apple possible. How does that look like? Look at it this way. What you could do is have your Mac fleet or your Apple fleet, Mac or iOS, being used by students or by staff and having them all about doing their thing. You as IT then know, hey, those devices are as secure as they can be. Those devices are managed. You know where they are at all times. You know if something goes wrong that you're able to help, etc., etc., etc. So without further ado, I would like to show you around into the JAMF portal, just to give you an idea of how that would look like. And then I would like to show you some key features, as in where JAMF really shines and where it can really help you within the organization. Again, it's very weird of me just talking. What I normally do is have a conversation with you to determine on where you're looking for, and because we can't really do that in this format, please use that Q&A bit to really ask questions so I can go a little bit more in depth into things that are specifically important for you guys. Again, if after this webinar you would like to go into a in-depth or a more in-depth conversation into JAMF and what it is you would like to achieve, then we're here to help. We're here to have that conversation with you. We're here to help you through that scenario. So in the background, or in my shared screen, you can now see JAMF Pro. This is my test environment. It's a little empty. there's smart groups and a few policy statuses here in the dashboard. It's nothing special because I only have 2 devices to test with, and that's fine for me. But you could show everything here, from updates on where your devices are. You can see that here in the bottom left, so you can see that all my devices are not up to date. Really good, Marijn, good part of the demo. But just to give you an idea, right, to make you understand, hey, this is how many devices have Chrome installed, and this is how many devices in a certain macOS version or a certain application version. This is where you have that grip over your fleet. So let's jump right in. So we enroll the device into JAMF. That can be done via 2 ways. That can be done via something we call zero-touch enrollment or user-initiated enrollment. For now, forget those terms, but know that one is without you as an IT admin having to touch the device very seamlessly, and we have multiple tools to help with that seamless experience. And the other side is a specific user goes to a URL and then installs a mobile config file and installs that on their device, and they're managed by JAMF. There are a few benefits to doing one over the other, but those are your possibilities there. So when a device like that is enrolled, what then? So we go straight into inventory, straight into we enroll the device. How does that look? So here we see my Mac Mini. It's a M1 Mac Mini, and we have that enrolled into my personal JAMF environment. It's behind me, or behind the screen that I'm looking at right now. So I'm not sure why I'm sharing that. But the idea is that here you could see the computer name of that device. You could see when it last checked in, or when the inventory has been updated. You could see IP addresses, so now you know where I live, because that's my personal external IP address. Please use that information wisely. But also version of JAMF itself, how it is enrolled, but also hardware on and software on the device, and how that would go about, and how you would be able to use that information to benefit your needs as an IT admin. For instance, you'd like to update all your devices to the latest version of macOS. You could use this information and say, hey, all the devices that are below the latest version of macOS, let's start installing that to, or updating that to the latest version of macOS. We'll go a little bit in depth into how that would work later, but that is where we could really shine with that. Next thing, user and location. In my case, this is now empty. If you're using a IDP or Active Directory or whatever, you could then, when a user is logging in for the first time, start adding the information you gather from that IDP, identity provider, to your JAMF instance. So you could say, hey, when that is happening, we add all the information here, so we can, instead of use searching on users or searching on devices, also search on users. Could be very handy to know which device belongs to who. Again, optional, but I think certainly for schools, this could be really powerful, so you know which device belongs to who. Then you also see here security. I'm scrolling through this, so I'm skipping a few things again. If you have anything you would like to see more in depth, please let me know. Security to see what's enabled. Also, if you have disk encryption. Excuse me, Martin. Yes, please.
I think that we have some trouble because we don't see any image more than the dashboard. It's
Is that so?
Maybe you have to. Yeah, maybe you have 2 screens connected at your laptop, maybe, or something else.
Sure.
Because we see your image now.
Made the joke that nothing would happen and everything would just work at the beginning, and now, of course, it doesn't. It's always the case, right? Let me see. Let me start sharing my screen again. What is a webinar without technical difficulties? Am I right?
Now appears different. You move the mouse.
Does it now work?
Yeah.
Now work.
Right now.
Well, again, okay. Apologies for that. But hey, IT, it's a challenge. So to go over where we were is there are a lot of ways to see then the information from that device. To quickly scope over what I just said, from inventory to hardware, software, location. So this for me is now empty, but this could be filled up for you guys. Storage, so you can see how full the disk is, if that's something you're interested in. But also disk encryption. If you have disk encryption set, I sadly do not, because I just destroyed my Mac Mini in testing. But you can add that here, and when there is then a problem with file fold, you can then grab that key from here, because that's automatically uploaded to JAMF, so you have that with you at all times. Again, some small things here, as you can see which device or which users are installed on the device. You can see printers that are installed just to get grip, or applications that have been installed by the user or by JAMF. To go to the second tab, here we see management. So this I always like to think as a awesome. I see in the chat that it now works. That's great. The idea behind this is more of a support panel, more of a, hey, you have a colleague or a student that has some issues, you can say, or a device that gets stolen, for instance. You can lock the device or remove all the data, because in some cases that's way more important. Or if you and a colleague or you and a student part ways on wrong terms, you could lock the device and give a notification with, hey, could you please bring the device back, or call this number because we really would like our device back. Could be a very handy way of using that. Also, to download updates, to just give the command to download the latest updates to see if that will resolve issues that they're having. Again, this could be all around on a single device level, some support buttons, some management commands that you could use within chat. And then last but not least, and you here have a history of what has happened on the device in the last whatever you're deciding on storing this data. So here, for instance, you could see, hey, my device, in this case, updates to the inventory once a day, and then updates macOS once a week. So we have that set up in one of our policies. I will show you where that is in a second. And we see that it updates every day and tries to install. We set some permissions here to test with one of the customers to see if that we could help there, but also installing applications. So we can see that I tried to install, or I installed Slack from JAMF, and therefore that is logged in here, so you see what's going on. Also audit logs on who logged in, so you can see who has logged in on the device, etc., etc., etc. Just logging. If you're now missing anything here, that is, of course, could be the case. You could add things to this inventory as well. So if you would like to know, for instance, what the health is of your battery on your MacBook, of the MacBook that you're managing, that could be the case. Then you could set something called a extension attribute. We have a library of extension attributes that can be used. For instance, the battery health, and then you could say create a separate a rule in here, so you could add a separate line and say, hey, is the battery health, or is what is the status of the battery? And it could say healthy or unhealthy. And then when it's unhealthy, you can then receive an email, for instance, hey, this device has an unhealthy battery. And then you as IT can then say, okay, let's contact that user and see where we can help to resolve that issue. This is just an example. There are way more ways that you could use this, but that could be one of them. So that's a little bit more into the asset management part of JAMF, or the where you can see what all your devices are. Now let's jump into the management part. So first and foremost, and the thing you will use 9 out of 10, I will skip over a little bit of the applications, the App Store applications, because that is quite standard to use App Store applications to be able to, via Apple Business Manager, install those applications straight to the device without needing an Apple ID. If you would like to have more information on that, let's set up a call together and let's jump into that a little more deeper. So policies are the non-App Store applications, are the services or applications or settings you provide to your users. For instance, installing Firefox, or adding a local administrator could be a thing you would be doing. Again, this is where that would be configured, and this is where you could set that up. So let's create a new one together. Here we see packages and installing software updates or scripts, printers, disk encryption. So here you could change the file fault recovery key if there was an issue with that. Here you could add doc items, add a local user. So like you could add this a local administrator and scope that to all your devices. So at all times you have the same local administrator to log in. If you then want a different password for every local administrator and send that into JAMF, there are also ways of doing that. So you have that level of extra security. Again, there are loads of options here, but this is where you could configure that. We could add it to directory binding. Personally, I cannot recommend that, but in some environments that is required, and therefore you could do that. File fault passwords, etc., etc., etc. So let's start with a package. But what is a package? How do we get a package? What does that mean? So for instance, if we would like to have Firefox, I think Firefox is a good example. I created this already, but just to give an idea. You know what? Let's find an application we're going to create a package of together. So we downloaded the latest version of an application from the distributor website, and we now want to package that into a package so we can distribute that to our devices. For this, we use something we at JAMF call Configurator. What is Composer. I swear I work at JAMF, and therefore I know all the titles of the applications out of the top of my mind. Not. But let's open Composer. So here we have Composer. There's already an application in that. That's cheating. So let's delete that. So let's install an application. I don't know what we're going to install. I'm just scrolling through this. Is Google Chrome fun? Yeah, let's do Google Chrome. I think that's a good example. So here we have Google Chrome. What we would want is to put that in the application folder of your users. How are we going to do this? There are a billion ways of doing this. We could grab the download URL from the distributor website, in this case Google, and then make that into a script and have always the latest version, etc., etc. But for now, we're keeping things very simple because those are applicable for most of the applications. It's not the best solution. It's not the most seamless solution, but it's a good solution to have if you want to maybe also set up settings. What do I mean with that? Is Composer is a tool that packages certain settings and applications you would have. Composer can work in one of two ways. One is by just dragging and dropping this into here. And now we wait. So what it has happened now is Composer created a file structure with the application in there. So if we would create a package out of this now, what would happen is I would create a Google Chrome package that puts Chrome in the application folder. We need to do some quick tinkering on this side of things, but I will show you that in a second. That is one way of using Composer. Second way of using Composer is by creating an image, a snapshot. And what does that mean? Is you create a snapshot on a test device. It needs to be as clean as possible because otherwise you get a lot of noise, we call that. So you create you install Composer on that device and you create that first snapshot. So after creating that first snapshot, you then install Google Chrome, for instance. And with Google Chrome, you're also setting some settings. Like for instance, you want to set it so that the background image or the home screen is the company website. So the home screen, the first time they start up Google Chrome, it will immediately start on the company website. So what you do is you install Google Chrome. After you created the first snapshot, you install Google Chrome, set it so that the home screen is the company website, then close Google Chrome, and then create a second snapshot. What does that do is those two snapshots, it will take the first snapshot of your whole device and then a second snapshot and checks what has changed between the first and the second. And therefore is able to determine, hey, Chrome has installed with these specific settings. And therefore, we are creating a package with Chrome and the settings. Chrome is a simple example, but this could be done with all sorts of applications. This is a very simple way of pushing applications, pushing settings very basically to the user. There are some drawbacks from this because you need to create a different package every time there is an update, or you need to set it to auto update. But that can be a setting that can be turned on in setting up that package as well. But that could be a very powerful thing to use. So yeah, for now, let's try this with just creating an application. And what we do here is, looking at the time a little bit, is setting it up. So we here have a rule of thumb is to do it like this. Root wheel should be the permissions the application has, and it should be 775 for setting it up. So let's create a package. This will take a little while. So this will take between 1 and 5 minutes, depending on the size of the package. So because I'm not really bothered with doing that, I already have some packages in here. So what you have to do, you upload that package into JAMF Pro, and I here have, for instance, Firefox, latest version or whatever. So we add that to here. This takes a little bit. We could call it Firefox to keep so you know what's going on there. And now we give it a trigger. So this looks very scary, but isn't. What I can recommend 9 out of 10 is do it on recurring check-in. So when that device checks into JAMF Pro, that happens every 15 minutes at default, but it can be shorter or longer what you want to. We recur check-in and it sees that it has a new policy available that is installing Firefox. We do this once per computer. You could do this ongoing every 15 minutes if that's something you want. I think your users will not like you for it, but you could do that with Firefox. And then you just install that, etc., etc. Here, last thing is we could set a scope. So we scope the device to an individual device. Here I have my Mac Mini, or I can scope it to a group. So I can say all the devices that are added to my JAMF environment get Firefox automatically installed. Instead of pushing it automatically to the device, you could also make it available. So there are 2 ways of really pushing a setting or a configuration to the device. That can be via just pushing it straight to the device, or making it available in self-service. So self-service, to quickly go over what that is here you could select self-service to make it available in self-service instead of pushing it straight to the device. And self-service is an app store by a JAMF managed by IT. So here is that self-service. And here we have, for instance, Dropbox or Office 365 or Word or whatever you want to make available for the users, something that sometimes people do not really use or do not really need at day one, but want available for when they want to use it. Also, something this could be used for is, instead of applications, could be printers. So here at JAMF, we have our printers here of our offices. And if you want to install one, that you could do by setting it up here. Last thing, and this is where, to give a little bit of background, I just started working at JAMF 4 or 5 months ago. Before that, I worked at a media company. And what we did there was very clever, is we had a button in here. And let me find it here. There it is. Here at JAMF, we call it the maintenance button. But at my old company, we called it the button that fixes everything. So when a user had an issue, or when a student has an issue, you could just click on that button, or ask them to click on that button in self-service, because that button fixes everything. And users would then come to me, and instead of run, it said fix me. And to quote Alice in Wonderland, and users or colleagues would say, that's ridiculous. I'm not going to do that. That will never work. And I said, please just try it, because it will. And then they clicked on it, the device restarted, and it opened up again, and 90% of their issues were resolved. Because what it does in the backend is just cleaning the cache, cleaning system cache, and restarting the device. 3 things that Apple users do not do out of their own. So we did that for them. They were installed, done. Happy users, happy IT, because they can do more important stuff than helping someone restarting their device. And that's where that comes in. So that could be really handy for the tier 0 support, to use an e-tail term. So that's what self-service is. It could be a lot. The branding and everything can be changed to your school or your company, and it's yeah. So the icons even in the dock can be changed. So that could be really cool. So that is configuration profiles. Looking at the time, I'm going to fly through a little bit of the rest. That was policies. Now we're looking into configuration profiles. What are configuration profiles? Configuration profiles is the framework. You could see it as API keys that are made available, or API commands that are made available via Apple for MDM providers like JAMF to use. So here you could say, for instance, configure a password. So if you're setting up a password on that device, it needs to be yay big, and it needs to be this complex, and it needs to be this minimum length, etc., etc., etc. Or network settings, and this could be done via just password, so the user doesn't have to, or via configuration certificates. So you could give an individual the certificates via another tool that we have and push that towards JAMF, so you have even more secure network. Again, completely up to you, but that is some of the settings that are in there. I will not go through all of them because I don't want to bore you too much with this, and it's very user specific, but it could be from DNS and VPN settings to directory folders into your shared folders, from login windows to dock icons to etc., etc., etc. Quick 2 things to keep to note here is that for giving certain permissions to the applications, like giving them access to the whole disk, or giving them access to certain things like you would do with Zoom or whatever, that is something that can also be done in here. So that's configuration profiles. Let's jump straight through to restricted software. I have 2 examples here. What I always say is, hey, BitTorrent is something that people can install themselves if they're admin, and has a certified Apple developer ID, so you can just install it. But the things you could do with it could be possibly malicious, and therefore you as IT maybe would like to block that. So what you do is you just block the process name BitTorrent and then kill the process. And then, so what will happen on the user end, they will start a BitTorrent, it will immediately close again, and then on the message you just say no. I can guarantee you the person who is then starting up BitTorrent, it then getting closed and then getting a notification with no, I think you will scare them shitless. And that is the idea here. So you could say, hey, please don't use this or whatever, or you could just say no. So that is one of the solutions. The other one could maybe be, if you're wanting users to only use Outlook, then we are going to block Mail, the application already on the device that you're not able to delete because it's part of system integrity protection. So here, what we can say is we restrict everything with the process name Mail, and then when that is started, it stops immediately, and we give them notification, please use Outlook, because that's the tool we use internally for multiple reasons. So that is a little bit on restricted software. I'm not sure if it's any. I'm not going through imaging because imaging is a little dead, so that's more from older systems. What I want to show you is 3 things. First is smart groups. 3 most important things. First is smart groups. Smart groups are a dynamic group that you can set for specific workflows. So, for instance, like we talked about, I want to install macOS, or I want all my devices to be on the latest version of macOS, and this can be the same with iOS. I want my device on the latest version. What I do here is then create a scope for all my devices who are not in macOS 11, the latest version of macOS. So what we do here is set a criteria. That criteria is the following. If operating system version is less or equal than 10.15.7, then they are part of this smart group. And then this smart group, what we saw in that policy, we just scope that as we just add that as the scope. So this group of computers is then the scope for updating to the latest version of macOS. could be a possibility. I use this at Fremantle, the company I worked at, as a fail-safe. So I could say, hey, if someone changes back the serial number, the users were able to change their host name. I mean, if they were changing their host name into whatever they wanted because they thought they were funny, JAMF will automatically detect that because the host name was not the same as the serial number, because we used the serial number as our host name at the company. We changed it back immediately. So then the user had the feeling that they were able to manage anything, but they weren't, because JAMF just changed it back if it wasn't the serial number. Maybe a little bit of a silly workflow, but that could be a possibility that you would like to implement. So that is one of the ways you could use smart groups. There are a lot of settings, and again, a lot of different ways of determining the criteria for that smart group. It could also, if you're missing something here, you could also use those same extension attributes to add them to that smart group. Could be very helpful. So let's jump to static groups. Static groups are exactly the same, but static, so not smart. Duh. So here we could just say, hey, select this Mac Mini because this is our test Mac Mini and we want to test everything before we push it to other devices and then make it into the test group, right? So, wow, that was typing at its finest. Test group. So you could say, hey, when I try a policy to see if it works, I just push it to the scope test group, and then I can test it and then push it out to anyone else. Last thing I really want to show is pre-stage enrollment. So what is pre-stage enrollment? It's being able to do a seamless enrollment into your Mac from getting it new. What do I mean with that is, if you have a clean installed device, or if you buy a device from a certified reseller or from Apple, you then open it and it automatically detects after connecting to the network that this device belongs to you. As you, I mean the company. And therefore, it automatically installs JAMF without IT having to touch the device at all, installs the configurations you've set in pre-stage enrollment, and then setting up how you want it to be set up. So you could use, instead of me just the user just creating their own account, you could say, hey, you need to verify via a tool we call JAMF Connect with an IDP like Azure. So you need to log in with your Azure credentials, and then we use those credentials to create your local user, and then that's it. There's no step 3 there. So a very seamless enrollment procedure. So users have the best experience, or colleagues or students have the best experience they can have. So how does that look like, or how does that look like on the back end? For instance, here, let me edit this because then you can see it a little better. Here we say in the bottom, we skip a lot of those settings. So we don't want to see location services or Apple ID or Siri. We don't want to set that up. We want to go straight to that. Doesn't mean that the user cannot set that up after, not at all, but we don't want to have that cluttering the user experience at the enrollment stage. So what you can see here is that this is my Mac Mini pre-stage, and we have connected this to our Apple Business Manager. I will not go too much into depth on how Apple Business Manager, what that is, but it means that when you buy devices from Apple, they put it automatically in Apple Business Manager and then make it available so JAMF can see, hey, a new device has been purchased. The moment it turns on and connects to the network, it automatically installs JAMF. It automatically goes through without IT having to touch anything. So we automatically assign new devices here, and we make it so the user cannot delete the MDM profile. You could add a lot of things in here, but this is the bare minimum for you to set that up. Here, one last thing I wanted to show is the automatically advanced through setup. This is a very new function in macOS. And what this means is, at the end of the day, you could clean install all the devices in a classroom, for instance, and then run this. So it skips through everything. So it skips through creating accounts, creating all the screens and setup, so you don't have to touch the device at all. And in simple terms, that means that you can have a clean device every morning with all the settings that you want because it's enrolled into JAMF, and no history of what happened the day before. So that's me talking a lot about JAMF. That is in a very high overview of how JAMF works on a backend, how it looks like, how you can use it as IT to benefit your environment or benefit your Mac fleet. Are there any questions? And I'm looking virtually at my colleagues here in the chat to see, because they're partially Spanish and I have no clue. So
Margin.
Yes.
Thanks to the presentation. I think that one of the good ideas, as you show during the presentation, is the Composer solution. As we know, normally this is the most effective way to see that an MDM solution is managing the computer more than the only providing restrictions and configuration. And one of the requests that appear in the chat is that some Mr. David Villanueva request if, in this case, as the IT manager have only access to a web browser using a Windows computer, obviously the console from JAMF can be managed without any problem. You can manage independently from any browser and from any OS, okay? And obviously I answer, I maybe can make the mistake, but I think that not. The Composer tool only be run in a Macintosh because only need capture the data of the application that is running in this computer, okay?
Yes, that is correct. That is exactly it. The JAMF, of course, is just a web browser. It's just a web tool, a web cloud tool, so you can just use it wherever, whatever, with your phone if you want to. But yeah, for Composer to really make that work, you need to run it in Mac, in a Mac environment, because you need to have that data to support Composer to create those packages.
Exactly. You can use the console from any OS and from any browser, only to manage. But to create the package, you need to run in a Macintosh computer that you can have hand-to-hand near of your console to make this package, and then you can distribute from the this case from the JAMF MDM. Okay. Another question that I think that it's important is that in some of the environments in high-end schools, the computer is used by several students, and as you mentioned, you can restart the computer and you can refresh the machine to a completely free status. Okay. But sometimes the user need be validated. We talk in the past more concerned to the enterprise environments, but normally in the school you can have a computer in the room of computers, and you have several computers integrated with the Active Directory that maybe have the school, or maybe are using the Office 365 or Google accounts. Okay. And I think that as your experience, you think that actually we can mention that JAMF can be integrated in this kind of environments that can be federated the users to the computers?
Yes. So to what you could do with those kinds of devices, what you could do is say, hey, we have an Active Directory, or we have another IDP provider that we can connect to JAMF, and therefore say, if you have an account in Active Directory, you will be able to log on to the device, and it will create a new account, and you will be able to do whatever. And then when you log out, we could create a workflow that account would just be disappearing again, and then next one comes in. Exactly the same idea. This could be with Active Directory, but this could also be with Azure Active Directory or with other cloud IDPs. Completely up to you. And that's where we can, if you're interested, if you guys are interested, we could go in depth into how that would look like for your organization and see where we can help there.
So it's more similar to the shared devices in a EOS environment, for understand, when we use the Mac in a classroom, for example. Exactly.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Sergio, no sé si quieres aprovechar para comentar si de los clientes que están conectados, alguno de ellos, no estoy viendo ahora mismo en el chat alguna otra pregunta de las que han ido lanzando, por si alguien que tenga alguna cuestión concreta que queramos compartir con la gente de JAMF o a posterior con nosotros, con el equipo ya de microgestió, estamos aquí abiertos a que nos podáis pasar cualquier consulta que tengáis y si la podemos resolver desde primera mano.
Tenemos una consulta de Marc Massó, que pregunta sobre el desplegament d'Adobe i les seves actualitzacions. I després també ens pregunta, que després te la passo, del Deep Freeze, ¿vale? Que ja el tenen desplegat, i si hi ha l'opció de deshabilitar aquest instal·lar software i volver a habilitar de manera massiva.
Vale. En quant a la pregunta del Marc Bassó sobre el tema de desplegament d'Adobe, el que és el paquet inicial d'instal·lació, òbviament aquest paquet es pot arribar a crear i a distribuir des de l'MDM. En tot cas, el que sí que són les posteriors actualitzacions, òbviament, tal com ho té plantejat Adobe, els updates són, en certa manera, online, a no ser que es torni a crear un package, en concret d'una única aplicació. Llavors, això sempre, per lo que veiem nosaltres, amb les aules, diguéssim, que al final tenen les solucions més de càrrega important de software, com pot ser el paquet Adobe, és que, lògicament, quan més granular estiguin fets els paquets d'instal·lació, millor. O sigui, més que fer un superpaquet que desplegui totes les aplicacions d'After Effects, d'Illustrator, d'InDesign, d'Adobe, tindreu granular, perquè d'aquesta manera sempre és més fàcil eliminar una part del software i tornar-ne a instal·lar una altra. És cert que també Adobe, les actualitzacions que van traient, quasi us diria que com molts fabricants, quasi cada mes treuen alguna funcionalitat i això també pot provocar un estrès a l'hora de fer un manteniment de les aules aquestes d'informàtica que puguem tindre i que moltes vegades tenim que limitar que no totes les actualitzacions es facin cada vegada que surten, sinó que es faci potser d'una forma planificada i potser fer-ne només 2 o 3 durant l'any si es poden evitar les 10 o 12 que a vegades poden arribar a sortir. Me preguntaves també, Sergio, comentaves d'una altra qüestió que no les estic veient jo aquí, no sé si te n'han passat a tu.
Sí, del Deep Freeze.
Deep Freeze en concret, precisament aquí entra una miqueta, no anem a dir en conflicte, però sí que complementa una miqueta el que comentava el Margin també, el fet que una màquina des del propi MDM es pot reiniciar i, en certa manera, fer servir una miqueta com el que fa l'usuari invitado que tens en el Mac, que aquella compte, un cop es reinicia, es borra tota. Si això és un usuari que té privilegis limitats, està clar que no podrà instal·lar res, però això no vol dir que, clar, si ens ha deixat en alguna carpeta local alguna informació, el tema de complementar-ho amb el Deep Freeze hauríem de veure quan es fa el desplegament de l'aplicació o es fa un desplegament de software, es poden passar també el que són els arxius de configuració d'aquelles aplicacions. Hauríem de veure-ho en detall. Ara li preguntarem al Margin, en tot cas, en concret, si amb Deep Freeze tenen ells alguna experiència d'aquesta integració. Margin, one question that appeared, and maybe I don't know if you from JAMF you have any experience with the solution, Deep Freeze solution from Pharonix. You know Deep Freeze from Pharonix?
It doesn't ring a bell.
Well, it's Pharonix is one provider of a solution that frees the machines. It's working in Windows and in Macintosh environment, okay? And it's used in several schools as protect that the computer that is used by several people or several students not is manipulated. And it's similar as you say that we can restart the computer and we lost all the information that the user West that access to the computer it's refreshed to 0, okay? But in this case, Deep Freeze can have any other additional options that can block, including some hard drive folders, okay? And you can, for example, you can protect or not protect some spaces, okay? And maybe the students can place data inside on one of the folders, but when you restart the computer, this folder disappear and be empty, okay? And at the same time, you cannot manipulate some configurations in the OS X, because you can have an MDM solution that you can protect the profiles, but if for any reason any user or any student manipulates something in the OS system, when you refresh the machine, it's starting on fresh because the machine is freezed. I think that is more integration between Pharonix, Deep Freeze, and JAMF that can be studied maybe in the future.
I think from what you're saying that there are a lot of things that JAMF can also do on the MDM level. I don't see why that should be working, couldn't be working together. I see when you then have, you could restart or clean install the machine with JAMF and then automatically install the application again and the settings, so you have that integration with those tools, so you can have that manageability. That should be fine, I think.
Yes, I think that in this case the Pharonix solution, the Deep Freeze solution, one of the good effects is that you don't need to reinstall nothing because the machine is freezed. And when you reinstall, it's all the data created by the student disappear from 0, not need to be deployed any application. Nice. In some case, we cross some information about Deep Freeze with JAMF, only to student maybe in the future how can be integrated between the two software providers, I think.
Yeah, sounds like a good plan.
¿Alguna otra qüestió?
Ara mateix no tenim més preguntes, però que comentaven els nostres assistents, evidentment, que en el moment que vulguin doncs, ens poden connectar en el nostre mail i, evidentment, a través d'allà, doncs, si necessiten una resposta més concreta o necessiten doncs, veure algun dels punts que hem vist avui de la demo d'una forma doncs, més propera o amb els seus equips, doncs, evidentment, podem fer-ho al moment que vulgueu. Si no hi ha més preguntes, doncs jo crec que I want to say thanks to Margin for the demo.
No worries.
And també a Albert Riera per la seva, evidentment, presència i, per suposat, a tots els assistents doncs, que heu fet possible aquest esdeveniment. Esperem veure-us més endavant i el que comento, això no només acaba de començar, per tant, doncs, a partir d'aquí, qualsevol dubte, qualsevol coseta que tingueu, estarem encantats d'ajudar-vos i donar-vos un cop de mà. Moltíssimes gràcies.
Perfecte, moltes gràcies a tots. Thanks, Margin, to your time. Víctor, Lisset. Bye, cheers. Fins ara a tots, gràcies.